Okay, real quick, I know I don't usually do this in the beginning of a video, but I just want to do a quick shout out to Vevor, who so kindly sent me this amazing table saw that sets up and breaks down and does all the things, which is perfect for me because you guys know I travel back and forth all the time. So I just want to give a huge shout out, thank you to them for sending this to me to try out, to let it work its magic, and obviously works good. So that's awesome. And okay, let's move on into the video.
So this is going to be a little strange. You saw me paint the original Breadbox that light color. I ended up changing that later just because I didn't like the way that it looks, but I did that in California, came up to Oregon, and now we're setting up the table saw. This is my first time. So I had put it together in California, the base and everything. The top doesn't have to get put together, but the base does. And that was an interesting day. It took me a while, but once I got the base done, it works super amazingly well, and it folds up, folds down, it rolls around, it's great. So this is my first time actually like playing with it and figuring out how things go and where all the pieces go, because it's a traveling piece. You can see like the push stick gets attached to it, and there's a spot to attach the wrenches that go in to be able to change out the blades and things like that. So everything is kind of all included in this, and that part was super fun for me. So you saw I had the extending part on the table, which is really great because thus far I've only used my stepdad's saw, and it just has the mini base on the, just like a traveling DeWalt. So that was super cool. So here, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I know that I kind of want to mimic some parts of the other Breadbox, but I'm essentially just building this as I go. I have no plans. I'm just playing around because this is my first time doing something, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. But if it does work out, then, that's even more okay. So initially, I'm just cutting all the pieces down to size that I know that I want kind of reasonably in the area that I want them in. Making them all uniform so that when I put them together and get them glued up, I can trim them down if I need to, so they're slightly oversized. And then for the edge pieces, I'm cutting off the jointable parts. So obviously the middle board, I want to keep that, but the two outside edges I want flush. And then I'm just going to do glue ups to get all the panels together, because these are thin boards. I obviously needed to make larger sides, so that's what we're doing here. And it was really great being able to go back and forth with these two boxes, because I'd get frustrated with the build, and then I could go to this one and just feel relaxed and paint something pretty. So that was really fun. I'm glad that I did these at the same time, because the one that I built was a huge struggle, and I felt like everything kept going wrong. So it was nice to be able to take a break and do this part. And you can see I had kind of that light color in mind. I wanted it to be this, but then as I was painting it, I just felt like a darker color would kind of frame it out a bit better, so I didn't include that, but that's why I ended up going quite a bit darker at the end. And you guys know clouds are the easiest thing for me to do. I just lay down a layer of wet paint, and then you can take white paint in that and kind of lightly draw clouds, and you kind of just brush them out and make them look very soft and fluffy. And then trees are also one of my favorites, because you literally just do blobs, especially distant trees. You don't even have to do extra layers of colors on them. You can just kind of put them in, and they're a background, so it doesn't matter so much. And they're always made with the type of brush that you're using. So different trees will take different brushes, because they'll make different leaf patterns and branches and things like that. So it's kind of fun just to play around and see what you can come up with. And I really have no idea what I'm doing with this one. I just know that I want to try out doing a little cottage, because I've never done one before, and I think that would be really fun. And you guys know that in a previous video, I said I wanted to work on my man-made structures. And so this was the first one that I did where I'm like, oh, I see. So I'm getting better, and I think that's what's fun about this, is every time you do it, you'll get a little better at something. And what's interesting to me is sometimes I'll do something that I've done really well in the past, and for whatever reason, it just won't work in one that I'm doing right then. And so I'm like, oh, I get, overall better, but there's still things that I still have to work on and practice on doing because, well, it's just hard sometimes. So I don't ever draw anything out like with a pencil or anything, but sometimes I will do it with paint just to kind of get an idea. And then I feel like the more and more paint you build up on it, the more realistic it looks or the better it looks. So I can start out with a base and kind of just build on top of that. And if I don't like something, it's just paint. Like you can either wipe it back or paint over it, and it's all going to be okay in the end. So as you can see, I'm going through and doing my second coat of this, but again, I changed this to the darker color, Goblin Gray, for those of you who are curious. I'm pretty sure you could have just guessed that just based off of my love of that color. And then I sealed this up. So this is a satin finish. This is what I initially chose, but then after putting the Goblin Gray on, I decided to seal it in a matte. So the front has extra layers of sealer on it just because I wanted it a matte finish, and then the same with the side. So the whole thing has an overall matte finish because I changed out the sealers.
Real quick, can I just say how amazing it is to finally be able to work outside again? Back in Portland, obviously you can see me moving back and forth. We're now in California again. Which doesn't make much sense. There's still snow on the ground. You guys know that I had one exciting winter in California where the snow just would not leave. But it is a lovely 68 degrees right now, and I am just so good. So good. Okay, I'm gonna get this saw out again and finish up my bread box.
So initially I'd planned to completely finish that box in Portland, which did not happen. That was a little frustrating. Everything just took much longer than what I had thought, and trying to get the design right and everything was a struggle for me. So I'm going through and finishing everything up now in California. But again, this table saw is awesome because it just packs up and goes down to wherever you need it to go. So as you can see, I cut the 45s around the edges and making that a perfect square, but then in doing so I have to figure out the exact size of the center and the top of the box, the bottom and the top. And then I can do a glue up there, and I'm just marking out the lines as I go because, as I said, this has no plans, so everything is getting marked and cut as I'm building it. I feel like this is a lot like cooking for me, and that there can be a recipe, but I almost never follow it. I might do it, maybe like give it a brief glance, and if there's something in it that I think is necessary, then I'll use it, but otherwise I'll just kind of make my own changes and do what I want. I feel like that's how it would work too. Like if I had plans, I'd be like, okay, I kind of see what you're doing there, but I'm just gonna do it my way instead. And I don't know that that's a good thing. It's just a thing, I guess. So anyways, you can see I took off the safety guard for this part, and that's just because I needed to get these little ridges taken out. And so what I'm doing is cutting up to the board but not through the board, just to give me these little insets for the door to be able to slide back and kind of sink into the frame. So it looks very flush in the front, and then you can see these little ridges up here, and you're just making several cuts essentially with the blade right next to each other continuously until you get it down enough, and you can chisel out the rest and then sand it down. And then I was so happy to get this final glue up. I can't even tell you how happy I was to get it finally put together. And then I had the hardest time with the hinges. So I got these ones put on after 3 different types of hinges not working. I had this one design in mind and they would not work. I could not get them to fit on the box the way that I wanted them to, and it was just incredibly frustrating. But I finally found these ones that were fine, and so I ended up just mounting them internally so that you can't see them. So initially I'm just mounting them on here like this, but then I actually do go in and chisel out and kind of give them a recessed area to fit into. But this is just to mark the holes and make sure that they're even on both sides and getting them in. Of course, I had to do pilot holes because the screws that come with these are those little brass ones that like to break off, and I did not want to deal with the heads popping off of screws and then me having to drill out the body of a screw out of, oh man, that would have just been too much for me. So I'm getting these on, and this is just a fun trick. This is hot glue. I'm getting that on the top board just so that I know exactly where it needs to be, and then I can mark out the holes on that, and then it will just pop off and I know exactly where it's going to go. So my glue here is really, really strong. If you have a less expensive glue or kind of like a removable glue, that would be the way to go, but this worked out just fine. So I'm putting these on, making sure that it's okay. They're going to be a little wonky initially just because they aren't sunk in yet, but after I do this part, I can draw around and make sure I get the exact fitting, and then I can chisel out where they're gonna go. And those are the other hinges that I tried. Those really long, elegant ones were the ones that I wanted to use.
Oh hi, Taryn here with Elegant Upgrades, and we've got our not one, but 2 finished bread boxes. And wow, this was a challenge of all challenges for me. You guys kind of know I'm an aspiring woodworker. I love to do all the repairs and everything. That just makes me so happy working on like these really old pieces of furniture. And then also, like, I built a drawer face before, which made me super, super proud. One day I'd love to be able to do dovetails. So I had this grand idea to make a bread box because, one, I make bread, and a bread box is kind of the best place to store the type of bread that I make. And so I was like, oh, I'll make a bread box. And I thought it was just the best idea I've ever had. And I had found this bread box at the thrift store, and I was like, this is great. It'll kind of give me an idea. Oh man, did I veer off from that, which probably wasn't the greatest of ideas, but I knew I needed my bread box to be shorter and a little taller. And that was kind of where it ended. So for those of you who have been around with me for a while, I have like this big thing of like a stack of flooring that was gifted to me by my grandpa. It's never been used. It was just kind of like a prototype of this walnut flooring that his company had. It's been sitting for years and years because it just never turned in anything. So I had this. I've used it for the top of a couple nightstands that I made. I was like, oh, I'll just use that to do the bread box. Now, had I been smart, I would have planed this down. And initially I was going to plane it down, but because it has the grooves inside, I was like, ooh, that's great because it will allow for aeration for the bread. And this was just brilliant in my mind, which it still kind of is. It's a good concept to have the air move around. Now, the downside is that this thing is really heavy, which again is fine. That could just be preference. But it's heavy and it made it a little more difficult to work with. I also did work with the fact that it is flooring, so the joints are all kind of stuck together like that, with the exception of the 45s that were done in. But anyways, it finally turned out. I had a really hard time with it. So I think eventually I will get like a magnetic clasp on here just to make it go quicker, because right now I have it just slightly flush enough to fit in and have a little bit of friction, and then it pops out because of, you know, it's easy to get in and out because of the friction. But I think a magnet would probably be the best route. Getting hinges on this thing was just the worst. But in the end, I did it, and I'm excited, and I'm just so excited that I built something. Now, with all of that said, I will be able to do something better in the future, obviously. I will know the mistakes that I made, and I'll be able to fix them and do a better job and do something similar, but fix, you know, like I said, all the issues.